Welcome to the Soul Archaeology podcast, a space for connection, resonance, witnessing, and learning. Together we'll harvest medicine from the spiral of life, sharing conversations with other embodied humans who have navigated their own initiations and found alignment with their true soul essence. With weekly astrology, energy updates, embodied conversation, and channeled teachings, this is a space for you to land and find resonance with the spiral of your own soul. Hello, so happy to have you here. Welcome back to Soul Archaeology. We are somehow at the end of May, which is just completely wild to me. This year is flying by, which I had anticipated because we are in one of those between years, the years where things move quickly, so much is shifting rapidly. We're going through many different phases, cycles, underworld journeys in order to propel ourselves forward along this evolutionary path. And with time being so squeezed, we're utilizing so much energy to process what we're processed, to do the deep work we've been doing. And it just makes time move more quickly. May has been a month of deep integration, of anchoring, of resourcing, reflecting, regrouping. The beginning of this year was so wild. I feel like every month just kind of built on the next month, and it was just this snowball effect that really climaxed at the eclipses. And then the last few weeks we've had just really intense wild energy, so much Uranian energy. I talked about that in the last podcast, a lot of movement and electricity. How was the full moon in Sagittarius for you last week? It was such a big one. I felt it so intensely. Over the last few years, my Sagittarius moon has been expressing in different ways. It's been more of a truth seeker and a journeyer through more inward lived experience rather than the travel and the expansion I typically gravitate towards. I've been learning much more in my own personal space, harvesting so much wisdom from that space, my own lived experiences, the experiences of loss, of relationship, all of the things that I've really been pouring myself into, teaching, learning, being a student, forever student. And this full moon felt like a shift. I think that as we move into Gemini season more deeply, of course, we had Jupiter entering Gemini on the 25th. And that's a lot of what I want to discuss today, because that transit it's a year-long transit. It's a transit that we haven't interacted with since 2012, the last time Jupiter was in Gemini. And it's a significant transit of 2024. But the deeper we move into Gemini season, the more air, of course, we have. We've been in some pretty intense fire and earth energy. So as we move into air, there's so much movement, perhaps some levity, perhaps some chaos, vata, energy that feels dry, quick. It could kick up some anxiety because it is so fast moving, some feelings of ungroundedness or even too much movement. And that is the essence of Gemini. Before I drop into the space of the twins, I want to just touch on a few things that will be happening this week. We have midweek, Mars conjunct Chiron, and this is activating. This is a day when we could feel our core wound surface. And of course, Chiron is a powerful celestial body because it really encourages us to transmute our wounds into medicine. It anytime something activates Chiron, and with Chiron being in Aries, it's so much about identity, about our power, our will, our ability to move out of a disempowered state, a victim state, and into our highest courageous expression, the place where we feel in power. And so with Chiron in Aries, conjunct Mars in Aries, it's fiery, it's hot. Mars in Aries is reactive. It is oftentimes feels like it needs to be defensive, or it needs to respond quickly, or it needs to push out to get what it wants. If it feels trapped, or if it feels judged, or if it feels like it's being attacked in any way, it can respond with the kind of the tail that whips around. And so just note where you're being activated and how you can bring more light to that space, more awareness, more of a pause. Towards the end of the week, we have Jupiter, trine, Pluto. And this is a harmonious aspect, which means they are working together to create some sort of change. This occurs on June 2nd, but we'll start to feel it May 29th, maybe even before. We might already be feeling it. These are two slower moving planets. And what's interesting about these two planets is that they are actually both at the beginning of their journey through new signs. Pluto is retrograding, but it's at 1 degree Aquarius. So it's still in Aquarius until September. So we still have this opportunity to start to get a feel for what this transit, this 20-year transit, will look and feel like. In many ways, where are you feeling like you're at the beginning of a new journey? Feels like you've opened a new layer, or the veil has dropped on a completely new dimension. Maybe an awakening has happened, or there's awareness around something you didn't realize before, or there's new potential. Jupiter will support this. Being at 0 degrees Gemini, it's almost like a kid in a candy store. It's fast, it's excited, it's perhaps reckless at times, but it really will start to open up clarity around what's actually possible in this next chapter. I know we've been doing a lot of regression work. So we've been doing a lot of work around kind of pulling back and into old patterns, old habits, looking to the past to harvest wisdom, clarity, medicine, whatever it is that we're needing in order to really move forward, in order to take steps in a new direction. And this Jupiter trine Pluto will be an interesting combination of energies. It is quite rare. We have both of these planets, which move a little bit slower, especially Pluto moves very slow, but they're both in air signs, which makes it a trine. There's a growth edge, an opportunity here to dream bigger, to push out a little bit on the walls of familiarity, to start to dream, to feel into what could be possible. I posted something over the weekend that was just so beautiful, and it was a time lapse of a lotus blossoming. And what was so beautiful is that you saw it because it was on time lapse. You were able to see the little contractions as it expanded. And I think about that so often, how disorienting it can be to be in a bit of a contraction. And I've talked to a lot of people who are feeling that recently. They might be getting these breakthroughs, but they're contracting a little bit, or kind of like pulling back or wanting to go inward. And that's super normal when we're walking this path. It's really normal to need to pull inward a little bit, or to maybe access a fear or tend to a fear that's coming up as you're pushing out and moving out. If we were always pushing out, we would explode. We need that small contraction to regroup, to go inward, to resource. And that's a really important part of the process as well. And so I think about these points that we reach, these up-leveling moments, thresholds, if we want to call them that, where we're confronted with anything within us that's keeping us from expanding into the next chapter. And it's just such a beautiful dance and so vital, because we never stop growing in this life. We just don't. but sometimes that growth is really fast and wild and very obvious. And sometimes it's tiny little contractions and expansions that over time create a blossoming and a blooming that is so beautiful and unexpected. So I really want to talk today about Jupiter and Gemini. And this is an interesting transit. I know I've seen a lot around this transit that's really expansive and optimistic, and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of potential within this transit. Jupiter spends a year in each sign. So the last time we had Jupiter and Gemini was 2012, 12 years ago, which is wild to think about. So maybe take some time today to just sit and reflect. Where were you in 2012? What lessons were you learning? Did something change rapidly? Did you perhaps go out on a whim and try something different? Or did you have a phase, quote unquote? Chances are wherever Gemini lands in your chart, it's looking for a makeover. It's looking for a new way of doing something, an opportunity to dream bigger, to reinvent, to approach something with a different perspective, courage, optimism. Jupiter is the largest planet. It's the optimistic planet. It's the planet that dreams big. It's always looking for spiritual growth, expansion, learning. It rules Sagittarius, and we know Sagittarius it learns through experience. It expands through experience. And it's always looking for a deeper meaning. So if you know people with Sagittarius, a lot of Sagittarius in their chart, or a significant Jupiter in their chart, or maybe their chart ruler is Jupiter, they probably are someone that's always looking to expand, always looking to grow, looking for the opportunity, looking for the higher meaning. And in the chart, Jupiter expands anything it touches. Because it's such a large planet, it holds so much energy. It's constantly looking to become bigger and bigger. It reveals. It learns through adventures, through experience. It's a scholar. It learns and then teaches. And wherever this is landing in your chart, what house it's landing in, maybe you have other planets that are there, it's looking for an upgrade. It's looking for you to dream big, to look beyond the walls of familiarity, to extend outwards, to reach for something. Gemini is the twins, of course, in the zodiac. It's an air sign. It's mutable. It's always moving, always learning, always seeking more information, more adventure, more variety. Sagittarius is looking for depth, for wisdom, for truth. Gemini is just looking for experience. It's raw perception rather than intellect. It's here to see. It's here to gather, but maybe not digest necessarily. It's not looking for depth. It's not looking for deeper meaning. It's just looking to gather all the clues, to play, to explore. I think in so many ways, Gemini is childlike. So if we think about a child, it's not dwelling on existential ideas and thoughts. It's simply being present, remaining curious. I always think about curiosity when I think about Gemini. It can also be impatient, sometimes reckless. It can sometimes lean towards anxiety because there's just so much to experience, so much to do, so many things and people to meet. But one of the shadow aspects of Gemini can be a lack of focus, a lack of follow through, perhaps a lack of strategy, containment, groundedness, depth. So in other words, it can feel chaotic. It can feel anxious. And so with Jupiter going in and magnifying these Gemini themes around communication, strategy, systems, information, data, truth, I think we're already feeling it on the global scale. Of course, we have an election this year, and who knows what's real and what's not. There's so much happening with AI where information's being skewed by the media. All of these things have been honestly magnified since we had the nodes in Gemini and Sagittarius in 2020. So this in many ways kind of amplifying those lessons around those themes. And Jupiter can have a little bit of that too. It can be so bountiful and optimistic that it can be excessive at times or overindulgent. So wherever you have Jupiter in your chart, there's of course this huge opportunity for expansion, growth, positivity, luck, abundance, but there's also the shadow that can be overindulgent or can lack awareness around where its limits are. With Jupiter in Gemini, which is, I don't know if I mentioned this, but it's going from May 25th to May 2025. So like I said, this is a year-long transit. It's where you're getting a makeover in your chart. But what's interesting about this transit is Jupiter it's in its detriment in Gemini, which means it's not necessarily comfortable there. Jupiter loves to really understand what it's learning, to kind of soak in the wisdom of the experience. And Gemini moves quickly. It's much more interested in moving on to the next thing than it is to deepen into the deeper meaning, the hidden truth, things like that. It's here to gather information. So when we think about that, this is really providing an opportunity to quantum leap. We will be receiving an influx of opportunity, an influx of data, an influx of new people, new experiences, new opportunities, whatever they may be, wherever it's landing in your chart, to grow more, to gather information, to really, really use discernment around what feels right and in alignment for you and what does not. I picture it as almost like a windstorm. There's so much coming in, so much coming out. It can feel chaotic. It can feel destabilizing even. It might feel overwhelming at times with how much is moving, how much is coming in and out, how much data is coming through. And it's really our jobs to anchor so deeply into our being, into our bodies, but also our higher heart and our higher mind to bring everything through our own truth channel. This is the time of discernment. I think that this Jupiter transit is going to really ask for us to use our intuition around what's real and true for us, what feels right and in alignment with us before jumping into new situations, relationships, circumstances. This energy is curious, it's fast, it's like hot air, and it wants to explore. It wants to be let free. It wants to be liberated. And of course, this is just a stage along the path. So it's here for a reason. I think it's here to expand us quickly. It's here to present a lot of different perspectives and opportunities before us so that we can choose the path, choose the timeline. And a lot of mercurial themes will be coming up. Of course, Mercury rules Gemini. So there will be a lot of focus on Mercury over the next year as well. When Mercury is in the sign of Gemini or in the sign of Virgo, it's most happy, most expanded. So when we have that transit, we'll be feeling more clarity around what's actually real for us and what actually feels in alignment. When we have Mercury retrograde, it could feel a little bit more heightened because we, of course, have this Jupiter emphasis on Gemini as well, on communication, writing. I think there will be a lot of opportunities for many of us to expand our communication channels, who we reach, what we're sharing. I think, unfortunately, there might be a rise in people sharing things they're not quite sure about, spreading information that's not necessarily true. We're already seeing an influx of that within the health, wellness, spiritual community, self-development. There's a lot of people teaching things that they aren't actually embodied in or maybe haven't spent enough time learning about. I think this will probably amplify during this time. And it's nothing to be afraid of, right? It's really a part of the Earth school that we're in. It's a checkpoint, and it's an opportunity to say, okay, let's test this out. What have you learned? How do you know that something's really true for you? What does your body do? How does your body respond to a yes? How do you know something is a yes for you? This is a lot of the work we've been doing, over the last few years especially, but it's really important to implement it now to become so intimate with your yes and your no, so that with all of the new information that's coming forward, you know what to do with it. With Jupiter being in its detriment in Gemini, it can feel destabilized, maybe not as smooth. We'll have to find new ways. Discernment, like I said, really resourcing. Utilizing the resources that you developed during Jupiter in Taurus. There will be a lot of movement wherever this lands in your chart, maybe even restlessness, this feeling of needing to go, needing to experience. You might want to switch things up, try a new way of doing it, really experiment, but it's important to watch for recklessness with spending, communication, changing things too quickly, getting a hit and acting on it before you actually really pull it through your own truth channel. But like I said, wherever this is landing in your chart, you're receiving an upgrade. It's time. It's important to feel free to act on the impulses and the things you really want to create and the inspiration that comes in through this transit, but also to stay in alignment with your values, your long-term goals, always checking in with your higher self, with that highest timeline. Jupiter has been in Taurus, so it's been much slower, more anchored. This energy of it moving into Gemini, it will feel much more light, mobile. We might want to expand, travel, experience more, socialize more. So it's important to feed that. It's important to have real time, one-on-one, in-person interaction to create healthy habits of exploration. Maybe it's creating something. Maybe it's taking up a new hobby, something to channel this desire for movement, for exploration, this curiosity into a healthy channel. If you've ever noticed a child who doesn't have something to focus on, or, like a teenager who doesn't have an outlet, just that sort of young energy, the energy of curiosity, of growth, wanting to mobilize and move, when it doesn't have a channel, it can be reckless. It can be destructive even. It can be too curious and get itself into trouble. So it's important to take up a new hobby or create something. Maybe you want to start a ceramics class. That's something I'm really focusing on in this coming year. Leaning more into art, more into creativity, more into really nourishing your social connections, your friendships, community. Sharing more. This is an upgrade for the throat chakra. So this is our time to resist the urge to share something before really checking in with our truth channel. I think for many leaders or people in a space holding place, it's important to utilize this energy to refine, to get really clear on how you want to share, what your messaging is, not sharing something recklessly before you fact check it through your truth channel, or spreading information that you're not totally in alignment with. This is a really wild time collectively to have this transit as well, because I think we're already feeling this scattered information that we can't completely or totally trust, things we don't know for certain are actually happening. And I just always come back to your connection to self, to the earth, and to source, and allowing that to be the place from which you connect to others. That place cannot lie. This time is, of course, an upgrade. And I know I've said this many times, but it's really our opportunity to work with the chaos, right? There's so much energy and information swirling around. How can you be still? How can you be present? How can you be discerning? How can you really utilize this time and space to become even more clear, even more anchored, even more self-aware, self-confident, to lean into play, exploration from your higher heart, to really bridge the gap, to remember our sacred interconnectedness, our sameness, the real and true beauty and connection in understanding others and their perspectives, and really truly sinking into and honoring the sameness, the intimacy. What an incredible time to be alive, right? It's truly so incredibly wild. I did a post on Instagram. If you're wondering where this energy lands for you, you can look at where Gemini lands in your chart. I also did a little breakdown on Instagram on a post. So it's just a nice way to kind of sit with where the energy is manifesting for you, what you can expect, how you can really work with it. The card I pulled today was the lava card, which is such an incredible card. It's so beautiful, the drawing, the illustration, and it's all about courage. Volcanoes are portals to the heart of our earth, ablaze with emotional fire. When they erupt, lava pours forth, covering the old and outdated while forging new pathways. Lava scorches everything in her path, a searing field of anger. But when she cools, she forms dynamic new landscapes that are fertilized by the nutrient-rich ash. Lava guides you to locate the fiery core within yourself. This period of change and transformation requires courage. It's important to access your internal magma and the deep desire that brought you where you are. You must hold yourself steady while old and unuseful paths and ideas are consumed around you. Once your molten courage cools, the past is simply a prologue, and the future transforms into a lush and fertile landscape, waiting for something new to take root and thrive. When it's balanced, you're determined and courageous. When it's imbalanced, averse to experiencing the intensity of life. To bring into balance, have a ceremony and ask nature for inspiration, guidance, and guardianship. Wow, it's so beautiful. I feel like that's so on point with what we're navigating and the courage that's really needed, especially as Mars and Chiron are conjunct this week, but also just the courage to stay anchored to oneself, to let go, to release control. Thank you so much for being here. As always, truly from the bottom of my heart, I'm sending so much healing through this transmission, so much love through this transmission. I appreciate your spending time listening to it, taking it in and keeping what resonates with you. As always, hold on to what resonates, let it transform you, let it move through you, and release what doesn't. I have one space left for summer mentorship, one-on-one mentorship. If it's something you're interested in, something you've been wanting to do, reach out, book a clarity call, or if you can't find a time, my schedule is quite busy the next few weeks. There's kids playing outside. There's a Gemini energy. If you can't find time, feel free to just reach out to me and we can schedule a time together. This is a very, very deep, sacred one-on-one container. We're going into your core layers, repairing the spaces that feel fragmented, where there's any interruption in the flow, integrating aspects of you, and just creating more wholeness, more peace, more love, more connection to self, and therefore a deeper connection to the world around you. Thank you for being here. I'm sending you all so much love. See you next week.